Hello out there in YouTube land. And again, thank you for coming to my talk show, Tell It Like It Is. I'm host Morrisman and my co-host
Joseph Spencer.
Thank you again for coming, Joe.
You're welcome.
Today we're gonna thank you. Today we're gonna do I guess kind of a sad topic, but it has to be addressed. So forgive me. In November 1963, November 22nd, 1963, we lost our 35th president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And for most, we believe that one guy, Lee Harvey Oswald, got up one day and decided, I'm going to kill the most important man in the country, and then I'm going to the movies. That's what we were supposed to believe, which is an insult to our intelligence. Now, I was 1 year old and living in Alabama at the time. Where were you at and how old were you, Joe? When
I was 15. I was pushing 15. No, I was 15, freshman in high school.
Okay.
When the news came down, everybody was totally devastated.
Exactly. Very dark moment in our history. Because I can recall as I got older, we had a lot of pictures of John F. Kennedy in my house. So apparently my parents really praised this man. We even had a vinyl record of one of his speeches. I wish I could find it today. Yeah. It'd be worth a lot on eBay.
They put Kennedy next to Jesus on the wall.
You're absolutely right. And I didn't understand until I got older, because I think that we can make this comparison. How black people felt about Clinton is how black people felt about Kennedy in the 60s. These were two men that were trying to do the right thing for every man and woman, not because of your social status or your financial status or your color. They were just trying to be fair men. And as I noticed, if you do your own research going down through history, that the majority of the men and women that tried to do quote unquote the right thing were killed. You know, here's a couple of examples. Huey P. Long. He was a politician in the 30s or 20s, and he was well on his way to becoming the president. And he had an issue with 10% of the people in the country owning 90% of the wealth. You know, he did this speech that was kind of interesting and motivating. He said, if you went to a barbecue, because he had a southern accent, he said, if you went to a barbecue and one man came along and took off the table enough grub to feed 20 other people, what would you say to that man? You tell him, come back with some of that grub. You know, and that's kind of how he felt, and it makes a lot of sense. Why a small percentage of people live very comfortable to the point of excess, and the rest of us struggle and don't have enough. So unfortunately, you know, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Huey P. Long, these were men that were trying to do quote unquote the right thing, but they were snuffed out or assassinated before they could accomplish what they wanted to do. And I'll say this and turn it over to you. Before Huey P. Long died, when he was stabbed, and he was stabbed to death, he was laying on the floor bleeding, and the last words was, please God, don't let me die, because I got so much to do down here. You know, and that was just heartbreaking, you know, that the good people leave, or should I say murder. But what are your thoughts on the JFK conspiracy? You know, what do you think?
Well, like I said, I was 15 years old. A lot of stuff is cloudy now because we were basically working off emotions, not information. And the information at the time, you were given to you by the media. And you know how the media is.
Oh yeah, the media controls us. We don't think outside the box, and this is where we get our information, the box.
You know, and when the Kennedys started getting in office, it was like they were the second coming.
Yeah.
You know,
change.
They were Irish, Catholic, and that was basically like being a white Negro, as they put it back in the day. Mm-hmm. A lot of people disliked it, especially the WASP. You know, the Klan disliked it, and it was a lot of tears and heartaches and disappointment. A lot of people saw their future going down because the second Messiah was murdered.
Yeah, it's like the air went out of the balloon.
And the people who committed this heinous crime at that time, I don't know much about them, like I said, from the media. And
well, from the research that I've gathered, and this is, you know, this talk show, we try to touch on topics that a lot of people are just kind of afraid to talk about. And, you know, they've been told not to talk about it. And thank goodness with the free media now, where we can sit here and discuss these issues and not worried about being yanked off TV, sponsorship being taken away. But from my research, this is what I come up with, and this is just my theory. This is Morrisman theory. But the CIA had something to do with it, because it's common knowledge now that the CIA was going to be dismantled when Kennedy got into office. He didn't see a purpose for the CIA because, as you know, and most of us don't know this, that the CIA are basically their own boss. They do whatever they want. They can kind of override the president or do things that the president's not even aware of. And Kennedy was like, I'm not having that. I need to know what's going on, instead of after the fact or the backlash. Yeah. So it's quite obvious that they had a vested interest in taking care of or taking out this guy, because they were going to lose their jobs and their power be stripped, because in this society, power is more than anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's more than money.
You know, but power without money is no good, and money without power is no good.
Exactly. There was a scene from The Matrix, and the character Neo was talking to the Oracle, and he said to her, well, what? She asked him, what do men with power want? And he said, I don't know. And she looked at him and said, more power. It's like, that makes a lot of sense. And I believe that's what took place. That theory about Oswald coming to work, you know, shooting the guy and then going to the theater, it's just nonsense. Mm-hmm. But, you know, that's what we were forced to believe, and that's what they kind of just said, this is it. I mean, thank goodness for the internet, because you can see these clips. And I seen 2 clips that were so significant. One of them was just before Kennedy was leaving the airport and the motorcade was there. The Secret Service guys were back in tow. They're literally on the sides of the car.
Yeah.
And their boss gestured them off to say, hey, we're not protecting, or he don't need that extra layer of coverage. And they looked at him like, you know, what the hell is this? This is our job to protect this guy, and you telling me this is okay, let's go sit down?
I remember that, and I thought it was because they were blocking the view of the president. But since you brought that perspective to it, it didn't. It
didn't make sense.
It didn't make any sense.
Exactly, and these were clips, news film reels that were not being shown back then. Mm-hmm. Now they're showing these clips, and now it's making sense that the most powerful man in the country, if not the world, comes to your town and you give him minimal protection.
Mm-hmm. Especially exposed the way he was going down that Dallas
Exactly.
street.
So they basically left him out to dry because they knew some people in that branch knew what was going to take place.
Excuse me. And when I got older and got more information, any vantage point a sniper would have would be covered.
Yeah.
You know, and so a lot of people had something to do with Kennedy's death.
Oh yeah, and they pointed out when you see these clips that the windows was open in these buildings.
Yeah.
And if they were on top of their game, those windows would not have been open. If somebody opened them 2 minutes,
there would have been an officer.
Somebody showing up, you know.
The people who in power would have saw different places where the president could have been sniped, and there would have been presence of people in those buildings, or the building would have been secure so other people couldn't get in there and shoot at the man.
Absolutely.
You know, man, this is 50 years ago.
Yeah, and they still haven't really came forth to say this is what actually happened. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at the Zapruder, and I hope I got the pronunciation right. Zapruder film, and you can tell by his body gesture that he was first hit in the throat, because he clenched his throat and kind of went down. The second bullet, which was the fatal one, hit him in the head and blew off the back of his head. Now, just by looking at that film footage, you can tell that shot came from front.
Right.
The other one came from the back.
Usually, I'm kind of familiar with guns. I hunt a little bit, but it seems like if a round came from the front and hit you in the head, it would blow off the back of your head. If a round came from this side of your head, this part of your skull would come off. Mm-hmm.
The second one could have actually not been from the back, maybe the side. But we know by looking at the film footage ourselves that first bullet hit him in the front and hit him in the throat. Mm-hmm. And even the news people reported this, but then they were told to retract their story and say it was only one bullet, and it was the bullet that hit him in the back of the head that blew off his head. But you can look at the film again and determine that he was hit in the front. And if we would have went with that, which was a truthful scenario, then it would have screamed 2 guys. And if it would have screamed 2 guys, it screams conspiracy. Instead of, again, one guy get up in the morning and say, I'm going to kill the president and go to the movies. Because that's where they caught Lee Harvey Oswald.
Every assassination on any great man has been a conspiracy. One man couldn't get up and go buy a gun.
Yeah.
You know, he was a sniper. He had military training. And it's sad, at this point in this building, at this time, by myself with no other information than this, he's going to be driving down the street at this time. And then I'm going to shoot him twice.
Yeah, I mean, there was really no evidence as far as you dig into the background research for Lee Harvey Oswald to have a reason to shoot the president. You know, the famous photo of he's a communist and he was holding a newspaper and a rifle. They've had photo experts throughout the years, and these are accredited experts that say that photograph was doctored. They did put his head on top of that body that was holding a gun in the magazine. And you ask yourself, if that's true, they're trying to cover up something. And if they're trying to cover up something, what is it that they're covering up? You know?
The fact that somebody's walking around with $10 million for killing this man 50 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I just don't believe it. It didn't make any sense. And just like with his brother, but you know, we're talking about John F. Kennedy, still a Bobby, but it was the same circumstances surrounding his death, that he was shot in the back of the head. The autopsy showed that he died from a bullet from the back of the head. There were tons of people in that pantry that day, and all of them attested that Sirhan was never behind Bobby Kennedy at any point in time. So how could he shoot this guy and the bullet, you know, goes around and ricochet and hit him in the back of the head?
It was an intelligent bullet.
Yeah, so it was another, So that's questionable too. So the whole Warren Commission's report, you know, it's just a bunch of bull, you know. I'm not buying that. You know, we live in a society now where they are releasing these documents due to the Freedom Information Act. And I couldn't understand initially, why were they selling these records for 50 to 100 years? Now, you know the answer to that. Fill in the blank.
They all dead.
Exactly. The guilty people are dead, you know? And that's what we do in this country. Now, I'm assuming that they perhaps do those kind of things in other countries. I don't know. But it's just sad, and it was a sad day, November 22nd, 63, that we lost a very important man. John F. Kennedy was expected to do some monumental things for this country, and some people was just not trying to embrace that change because there was no benefit in it for them. You know, he was trying to be fair across the board, and they just wouldn't allow him to do that, and as a result, they killed him.
1963 was how many years after the Civil War? 80-something years? 90 years? Jim Crow was alive and well. And like me and you, if our parents were in power for the last 150 years, we don't want to give it up. It's just as simple as that.
No, most people that have been corrupted and been on top for so long, they would rather die to give up power.
Yeah, and we've been taught that we were the supreme beings. Things in this country wouldn't be the way they were because of wasn't for our family. We're pilgrims. We the first one that came over here. Like I said, he was an Irish, he was a Git. You know, when I was a little boy, people, even black people talked about Irish Gits. You know, it was almost even worse than Obama becoming president, especially in 63.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the reason why Joe Spencer is my co-host, because he can give me us insight on what was taking place in the 50s, 60s, you know, because I was born in the 60s, so things that took place prior to that, I wasn't aware of because I wasn't here. So it's nice to get a view from someone who actually was in that era, was living in that era. And I thank you for, you know, for giving us this information on some insight.
I enjoy this. I really do.
Yeah. And before we leave, I'm going to read a little passage from Wikipedia. And it basically states this. Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas, Texas. Lee Harvey Oswald was charged with the crime, but he was shot and killed by Jack Ruby 2 days before the trial could take place. The FBI and the Warren Commission officially concluded that Oswald at the time was the lone assassin. However, the United States Selective Committee on Assassinations concluded that these investigations were flawed and that Kennedy was most likely assassinated due to a result of a conspiracy. So I'm going to leave you with that, and on that note. And as always, I thank you for coming to my talk show, Tell It Like It Is. And Joe thanks you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And have a good evening. Thank you.